How you doing? Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm glad you're tuning in. Today we're gonna talk about cults, baby. We're gonna talk about you and me. We're gonna talk about cults in ancient Rome. And we're gonna talk about a particular cult called the cult of Mithras. We're gonna talk about the crossover that the cult of Mithras has on the early Church of the Roman Catholics, specifically with Constantine. So we're going to go through all that. We're going to talk about the cult's beliefs and all of that jazz. So if you're interested in cults, history, how things came about, or why Christianity is the way that it is today, like i.e. why do we practice like Christmas on a date that we know Christ like would not have been born, or like what's with Easter, or like a whole bunch of other stuff, like why do we do that? Stay tuned because we're going to talk about all of that. Before we begin, I would like to beg, plead on my knees for you to subscribe to my channel. The reason is, do you know the reason? Because if you start a YouTube channel and you start pumping out videos, right? Like I've got like 20 odd videos, and not enough people subscribe at the start, YouTube's algorithm is like, that's junk. See you later. And so that's why like literally every content creator on YouTube will ask you to subscribe and like their video. If you don't subscribe, it'll all be for nothing. Do you know what I mean? I don't mean to be dramatic, but also like if you have to sign into your Gmail account to subscribe, I understand that is a sacrifice for you. I get it. I so understand that. But the amount that I would appreciate it, I cannot tell you. I cannot tell you how much I would appreciate it if you could. Hopefully this video inspires you to be like, hey, I've got a question. I've got a question. Maybe I need to ask that question in the form of a comment. Even that would be great, you know? Because then you'd have to sign into your Google account and then maybe you could just click that. Just click. I'll stop. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about the cult of Mithrasism. Mithras is the monotheistic deity that we will be speaking about. Don't know what that word is? Don't you worry, because I will explain it all. Okay. So basically, at the end of the Roman Empire, okay, so let me give you a historical, like, let's get orientated first up. So if you're a Christian, you will know that Jesus was a Jew, okay? Which means that he was primarily practicing the Jewish faith. He was born into a Jewish practicing family, and his whole missionary experience happened in sort of in and around Israel, okay? Which is, and I'll put in a map. This is Israel, okay? So, you may have heard that like when Mary had Jesus, she had to like escape to Egypt. If you've never seen this map, I hope this makes sense now. But essentially, Rome, you know, you remember how, and if you're not Christian, in case you don't, spoiler alert, Jesus gets murdered. He dies via by crucifixion, which happens to be the most painful form of capital punishment. That's a fact, actually, because like your lungs fill with fluid, and it can take like up to 72 hours to actually die if you're crucified. So anyway, the Roman ruler at the time in Israel, in Jerusalem, basically he had to give the all clear. He had to give the all clear to crucify Christ on the cross. Now, that's because Rome at this time had expanded its rule so far over a lot of the earth. Well, that's actually not true. It expanded its rule over a lot of Europe. So the period of time that we're talking about is past Christ. So we're in the common era. You might like commonly see like AD. Well, we now use the system CE or BCE. Now, prior to Constantine, Christian followers were killed in Rome. In many areas, actually. They were very much persecuted, and they were killed in the Roman Empire. We're talking about 300 years, you know, it's a long time. So there was various ups and downs of persecution towards the Christians. One of the Roman emperors, I think it was Nero, basically like blamed a massive fire on the Christians and like burned them all, like a whole bunch of them. Anyway, some emperors didn't care that much, some cared a lot. So the state mythology was the Roman mythology, right? And that was polytheistic, okay? Big words, I get it, but polytheism means more than one god. Mono, like one, monobrow, this is a good trick. Monotheistic means one god, okay? So the Romans followed they essentially copied the ancient Greeks and I've got a video on that. It's the last video I posted. It's a long one because we're talking about a shiz ton of gods. This is like an example of the family tree, okay? When I say polytheistic, I mean polytheistic. So Christ's life and death happens at 0 CE. We're talking about 330 CE, okay? So 300 years has taken place in between Christ's living on earth, preaching, spreading Christianity, his 12 apostles spreading that message further. And we're 300 years into the future, okay? And the Roman emperor at the time was Constantine, who later went by Constantine the Great because I guess he just chose his own name. Now, it wasn't just Christianity that was sort of outlawed. It was like anything against the state. Polytheistic views was outlawed. So there was an offshoot called Zoroastrianism. Don't stress. I know your heart rate's going up and you're panicking. It's fine. It's all okay. It's a big word. Zoroastrianism is actually an Iranian religion and is one of the oldest faiths. And it was a monotheistic, so one god. Now, there were various offshoots of that, and one of those offshoots happened to be the cult of Mithras. It was a cult because it was an underground belief system, okay, in the Roman Empire at the time. It was not unique to have a different religious belief in the Roman Empire, right? There was vastly different religious beliefs. But the cult of Mithras was indeed a cult. So before we get into what happened in the cult, let's actually define what a cult is. So the social science definition of a cult is this. A cult is a group or movement held together by a shared commitment to a charismatic leader or ideology. It's a belief system that has answers to all life's questions and offers a special solution to be gained only by following the leader's rules. It requires a high level of commitment and at least from some of the members, if not all. So with that definition, you can probably place a lot of what maybe you didn't consider a cult into the cult basket. Okay. It also does not have to be religious in nature. Cults have been formed around like sports, around all sorts of things. Okay, so the reason, this is gonna annoy some of you, it annoys me. The reason the cult of Mithras is so fascinating is because it's so we don't know a lot about it. Because it was a cult. So all of their stuff that they did, it was extremely secretive. And what we do know, we've archaeologically backed up. So we've dug up some of these temples of Mithras worship. And we've identified that particular individuals who were extremely high in the Roman pecking order were a part of this cult. So if you were a part of the Mithras cult, it was forbidden for you to pass on the information of that cult to anyone else. Absolutely forbidden, which makes it all the more interesting. There are no sacred texts remaining to this day. So it was well hidden. It could have even been an oral tradition, we don't know. So how do we know it existed? Like I said, archaeological temples that were underground have been dug up. And that's how we've surmised what this cult actually believed in. So what we do know is that from the excavation of Mithraea, we have found Mithraean worships all across the Roman Empire. So like this wasn't just like a small time, like, you know, in the back corner. No, this was like well practiced across the Roman Empire. Not just in Constantinople, where Constantine, you know, made the capital, but everywhere the Romans were. Even in Britain, because there was a collection of Romans in Britain at I think prior to this. You know what, I should probably look this kind of crap up before I film videos. But yeah, even in Britain, there were smaller underground worship makeshift temples for the Romans to practice these cult rites and rituals. Interesting to me was Constantine actually a believer of Mithras? And was his institution of Christianity more a political move versus a spiritual one? That's the question that we will be investigating, because I feel like it. So there's something called the Constantinian shift, right? So the remaining Roman Empire, half of it's kind of fallen to crap at this point. The other half is still going hard. Constantine the Great is the emperor of the remaining Roman Empire, which sort of had shifted the center of gravity in the Roman Empire from the remote and depopulated west to the richer cities of the east and the militarily strategic importance of Asia, and Persia as well was a big force at the time. So anyway, Constantine as a emperor went to war a whole bunch of different times, and all of them are quite significant, but we're not going to be covering that because frankly I'm more interested in the cult I'm going off script here because you know what? So essentially what happens is Constantine is like the emperor, obviously. And he, as the story goes, has a dream, sees Christ and the cross, and realizes that Christianity is the true religion. Then he changes the state religion to Christianity, whilst, we believe, actually practicing in the cult of Mithras, okay? Why did he convert and change? He literally changed the state religion to Christianity. Like the whole Roman Empire, we believe in Christ now. Like literally starting the Roman Catholic Christian domination that would literally fist hold in the tightest clutches for like thousands of years to come. He started that. Whilst we speculate that he didn't even have a true conversion to Christianity as he said he did. Why? Because the story of his conversion came years and years and years later and possibly was written by somebody else, not Constantine himself. And we have literal archaeological evidence of Mithras worship in Constantinople. To further like bolden the point, Christians were persecuted in the Roman Empire. Like, you legally could not practice Christianity, and you were persecuted against by law in the Roman Empire. And so Constantine just one day is like, whoop, we're changing that. Historians, including Professor Emeritus of the University of Albany, hold by the fact that Constantine's baptism happened after he died, and that his entire conversion story was fabricated to introduce Christianity as the state religion as part of real I can't pronounce that word because it's in Latin. And so Mithrasism, what was it? Well, what we do know is that it was, like I said, a monotheistic cult that was worshipped in absolute secret. No written record. Now, the most of what's known about Mithras is that he, like Jesus, was the one single divine savior of mankind. Mithras was believed to have been fully grown from the earth itself, from the rock of the earth itself. He was a product of the earth and was brought forth out of the rock. And that is confirmed by a number of sculptures that have survived in these underground worship areas. He always is depicted clutching a sword in his right hand and a torch of flame in his left, other way around. In many depictions, the rock is also encircled by a snake, the adversity. In Mithraic cults, primarily, there was also representations of Mithras shooting an arrow to a rock and water gushing from the rock. This myth obviously parallels Christianity because we have similar stories in Christianity about Jesus. Both Christians and Mithras cultists used water as a symbol of their saviors. Baptism and like in the New Testament, Christ is referred to as the water of life. In Mithras, it proclaims him to be the ever-flowing stream of life. Water of life, ever-flowing stream. In the center of Mithras cultism, there is always a sculpture showing Mithras as a young man, usually wearing a cape or and I'm not going to be able to say this word, Phrygian cap. It's kind of like this, and then it has like a floppy bit on the top. Like that. Bloop. Now, when he's slaying the bull, there's like people standing by with torches. A serpent is always present, and we don't really understand exactly what's being represented because we don't have the written records because it was a cult. You know what I mean? So we're not 100% sure, but it appears that the figures correspond to the sign of the goat, the signs of the zodiac. 12 disciples, 12 tribes of Israel, 12 zodiac signs, 12 correlations for the cult of Mithras, right? The closest parallel between Jesus and Mithras is the use of a ritual meal. So after slaying the bull, Mithras was believed to have shared the bull's or the cow's meat with the sun god Sol Invictus, the sun, like literal, like S-U-N, the sun. Now that meal is shown in Mithraic cult iconography. We see that it was, this feast was ritually reenacted as a part of a liturgy. It was a sacrament. It was ritually participated eating the meat, you know. Manfred Claus, who's a scholar of the Mithras cult, speculates that the similarities between Christianity and Mithraism may have made it easier for members from the Mithras cult to convert to Christianity without having to give up their ritual meal, their sun imagery, their candles, their incense, or their bells, which are all very heavily Mithraic. Which might explain why the Christian church adapted to try to stamp out stulti hominis. That's another Latin word that I'm pronouncing incorrectly. People who still paid obstinance to the sun every morning on the church steps. So people would pay homage to the sun instead of the Son of God being Christ, and that was naughty. Now, I can honestly sit here all day and connect things. So, like, there's statues of the Good Shepherd. Essentially, an image of a Roman god with a sheep over their shoulders compared to Christ with a sheep over his shoulders. You know. So, Christmas. The Bible never states when Jesus was born. But by late antiquity, Christians had begun celebrating his birth on the 25th of December, which we today celebrate still. In 274 AD, during this time period, the Constantine shift, the Roman Emperor Aurelian declared that the 25th of December was the birth date of Sol Invictus. Remember, that is the pagan sun god. It was actually Syrian origin that this sun god came from. And Sol Invictus is a whole nother video because it's a whole nother cult. And it was vigorously promoted in the earlier years to Constantine. So, general comparisons. Some may say that the cult of Mithras, that the cult of Sol Invictus proves that Christ himself was an invention of paganism, an invention for political gain, that he may not have existed. Most reasonable literature, Professor Emeritus of the University of Nottingham writes that the parallels don't indicate that Jesus did not exist, but rather that he was maybe not as perfect as evangelical Christians believe that he may have been, which I think is very common sense. He's frequently spoken of as perfect. And that may be an exaggeration. Did he exist historically? I think so. I think the evidence is there. And so do most historians. But obviously there's always people that take the other side. Now, some archetypes that are very, very similar to a lot of other pagan beliefs, I suppose. Pagan being literally anything prior to Christianity, to be honest. It's like, it's not a very good, I don't really like the term because it's kind of used as like pagans, you know what I mean? But it's like, these were like complex religious belief systems of many different areas of the world. Anyway, focus, Talia, focus. So let's begin with miraculous births. Classical mythology is filled with miraculous birth stories of various kinds. In most cases, divine offspring have intercourse with the mother, and the mother is typically a mortal woman, like i.e. Zeus, and like 250 something women. So, you know, miraculous birth is not super rare when it comes to classical mythology. Just go and watch my last video, for goodness sake. One being Adonis, one being the Prythian god Attis, one being the Egyptian god Osiris. There's even a Sumerian god that's associated with vegetation and fertility, who was worshipped in the East. I think it's Tammuz. Again, very, very similar. Was Christianity a way to politically find more power? What I can say is that the Orthodox Christian Church did canonize him and consider him a saint, and the first Christian emperor, and is considered to the same level of holiness as the apostles of Christ himself. Obviously, the Roman Catholic Church became extremely, and to this day is extremely influential. So, I mean, you can make those choices for yourself upon which you wish to believe. But yeah, the cult of Mithras was real. We know that a lot of Romans practice this. Maybe next, let me know if you like this video. If you like the video, I'll do a video on the, like, even Zoroastrianism, which is the Islamic cult that Mithrasism came from. Even Sol Invictus. There's a lot of cults, you know, there's a lot of cults today, yesterday, and all throughout history. So let me know below. What do you think? What do you think? You know, if you're a Christian, I have been raised Christian, so when I learnt the ancient, well, semi-ancient origins, it was confronting for me because I was like, wow, I never knew I never knew this, you know? So yeah, let me know what your feelings are about that. I don't want this to degrade anyone's beliefs whatsoever, but it is historically accurate. This is the history. So yeah. I'll see you next time. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Bye guys. See you next time.